The winter of 1887 broke hard and late over the Bitterroot Valley, and Samuel Holt's hands had not been warm since October. He stood at the kitchen window in the gray pre-dawn, watching ice still crust the watering trough in the yard, and he felt the cold not only in his fingers but somewhere deeper, in the hollow space behind his ribs that had not filled since Margaret died. 3 years of hollow. He pressed one palm flat against the glass and let the chill bite into it, because the bite reminded him that he was still here, still present, still needed. From the back bedroom he could hear Lily stirring, the small shuffle of her feet, the soft knock of her elbows against the headboard as she turned in sleep. She was 4 years old, and she was the whole of his world, and she was reason enough to keep his hand on the glass rather than let it drop. He pulled away from the window and moved to the stove. The fire had died low in the night, and he fed it carefully, splitting kindling with a hatchet blade worn smooth from 10,000 mornings just like this one. The coffee pot went on, the porridge went on. He moved through the kitchen in the practiced silence of a man who had learned to be both mother and father by necessity, not by choice, and the smallness of his competence at it was something he felt every single day. Lily needed more than oatmeal and clean boots. He knew that. He had always known that. The letter from the Dunmore agency in Missoula had arrived 6 days prior, folded twice inside a plain brown envelope. They had 3 women on their books willing to consider a housekeeping arrangement in a rural property. No matrimonial expectations required. The agency was careful to say that. No matrimonial expectations required. He had read the line 4 times. He had written back the same evening, describing the ranch, the child, the terms he could offer, room and board, a modest wage, and a clear end date, through spring only. It seemed the honest thing to say. He poured himself a cup of coffee he was too tired to taste, and waited for his daughter to wake. The agency's reply came on a Thursday, and with it a second letter inside, written in a hand that was careful and even and somehow tired-looking, the way a person's script looks when they have been writing under grief. Her name was Cora Voss. She was 31 years old. She was a widow out of Billings, Montana. Her husband 2 years in the ground, no children of her own. She could cook, keep house, mend, manage a kitchen garden, and she had experience with young children from her years, helping at her sister's household. She did not write about her feelings on the matter. She did not say she was eager or hopeful or willing. She simply stated her qualifications, stated her availability, and at the very bottom of the page wrote one sentence that Samuel read 3 times in a row before he set the letter down. She wrote, "I am not looking for a new life. I am only looking to be of use somewhere until I know what comes next." He understood that sentence completely. He folded her letter back along its original creases and set it on the mantelpiece where he kept things that mattered. He wrote to her that night, after Lily was asleep, while the lamp burned low and the wind came hard off the mountains. He told her the terms again, plainly. A wage of $8 a month. Her own room, small but private, with a proper door and a latch. Meals taken with the household. The work would begin no later than the first week of April, and the arrangement would conclude at the end of May, through spring only, unless either party found reason to discuss otherwise. He was honest about the child. Lily was quiet more than most 4-year-olds, had not spoken much since her mother's passing, and needed patience more than cheerfulness. He did not want Cora arriving with expectations that did not match the truth of the place. He sealed the envelope before he could add anything more, because he felt the urge to explain himself rising in his chest, and he did not think it was wise to explain himself to a woman he had never met. She arrived on the 9th of April, on the afternoon stage from Missoula. Samuel drove the buckboard to meet her. The sky was the particular sharp blue of early Montana spring, deceptive in its brightness, the air still carrying enough cold to cut. He stood beside the wagon with his hat in his hands, watching the stage pull in, and he was aware of feeling something he had not expected, a nervousness that had nothing to do with practicality. She came down the stage steps last of the three passengers, carrying a single worn travel bag and a small crate that seemed to hold kitchen items wrapped in cloth. She was of medium height, dark-haired, with a face that was composed the way a person's face is when they have decided in advance not to be surprised by anything. She wore a gray wool traveling dress, clean but not new, and her boots were sturdy and well-resoled. She looked like a woman who had made peace with practical things. Their eyes met, and there was a brief, assessing pause on both sides. "Mr. Holt," she said. "Mrs. Voss," he said. "Welcome to the valley." He took her bag and the crate and loaded them into the wagon bed. He was aware that it was a short greeting, shorter perhaps than courtesy required, but he did not know what else to say that would not sound either too formal or too familiar, and so he said nothing further and helped her up onto the buckboard seat. They drove north out of town in near silence. The road was rutted from snowmelt. The mountains to the west still held their white shoulders. After a mile or so, she spoke. "You said in your letter the child has been quiet." "Yes." "How quiet?" "She'll answer a direct question. She doesn't volunteer much." Cora looked at the road ahead. "That's not unusual. Some children grieve inward." He glanced at her. "You know something about it." "I know something about grief," she said, and did not say more. When they reached the ranch, Lily was sitting on the porch steps where he had left her with a picture book she could not yet read, tracing the illustrations with one finger. She looked up when the wagon pulled in. She watched Cora climb down from the seat with the careful attention that children give to strangers, assessing without showing that they are assessing. Cora crouched down to Lily's level without being prompted. She did not say anything right away. She looked at the picture book. After a moment, she said, "Is that a rabbit in the picture?" Lily looked at the page. "Fox," she said. "Ah," said Cora, "I see it now. I was wrong," and she stood again, without making a fuss of the exchange, and followed Samuel inside to see about her room. That first evening, Cora cooked supper from what was in the larder: salt pork, potatoes, dried apples stewed with a little sugar she found in a tin. Samuel set Lily's bowl before her without comment. Cora served herself last and sat at the far end of the table and ate without ceremony. Lily watched her sideways the way children watch adults they are uncertain about. When supper was done and the dishes cleared, Cora wiped down the table and then sat by the stove with a piece of mending from her travel bag, working in the lamplight without asking what needed to be done or whether she was in the way. Samuel, across the room at his desk with the ranch ledger, found himself looking up from the figures more often than the figures required. He did not say anything about it. He simply looked back down at the ledger and added up a column of numbers he had already added 3 times. She had been at the ranch 9 days when she found the family Bible on the shelf above the fireplace. It was a large, worn volume, the cover soft with age, the pages edged in the red gold that old Bibles always carry. She had taken it down only to dust the shelf, but it fell open at the page where families are recorded, the birth and death columns kept in the same careful hand. Samuel Holt's hand. She knew it by now. Margaret Ann Holt, née Calvert, born April 3, 1852, died February 11, 1884. Lily Ruth Holt, born October 9, 1883. And Samuel's own entry in his mother's hand, older ink, Samuel James Holt, born December 2, 1849. She stood for a moment with the Bible in her hands, looking at Margaret's dates. February, deep winter, the worst time to lose someone. She closed the Bible and set it back on the shelf, with more care than she had taken it down, and she did not mention it to Samuel. But she thought about it. She thought about it that evening while she brushed out Lily's hair before bed. The child had begun allowing this on the 3rd day, presenting herself at the washstand after supper without being asked. Cora worked the brush through the small dark tangles gently, and Lily stood very still. "My mama had long hair," Lily said. Cora kept the brush moving. "Did she?" "Papa keeps it, in his dresser." A pause. "A piece of it." Cora did not answer right away. She finished one side and started the other. "That's a loving thing," she said finally. Lily seemed to consider this. Then she leaned back slightly, just a fraction, so that her small shoulders were a little closer to Cora's hands. It was not much. It was everything. The cold in April was the kind that came and went, teasing. 3 warm days and then a frost hard enough to kill the early seedlings Cora had put in the kitchen garden. She replanted without complaint. Samuel, watching from the fence, said, "You don't have to do the garden. It's not in the terms." She looked up at him from her knees in the dirt. "I know it isn't." He nodded and went back to the fence post he was setting, and neither of them said anything further, but something had shifted slightly in the air between them, the way temperature shifts before weather changes. She mended his coat in the 3rd week, a deep tear in the left elbow he had been ignoring since January. She did not ask permission. She simply found the coat on its hook, took it to the table, threaded her needle, and had the tear closed, and the fabric reinforced with a scrap of matching wool inside of an hour. She put it back on the hook. He did not notice until the next morning when he reached for it, and then he stood for a moment with his hand on the mended elbow looking at the work. He did not say thank you immediately. He said it that evening, over supper, as though the words had taken all day to arrive. "The coat," he said. "You didn't need to." "Your elbow was getting wet," she said. That was all. But he lay awake that night longer than he meant to, listening to the wind work at the eaves and thinking about a woman who repaired things without being asked, who replanted what frost killed, who crouched to a child's eye level and admitted she was wrong about a fox. He told himself it was gratitude he was feeling. He was fairly sure that was not entirely true. The trouble came from the Delacroix parcel to the south, or rather, it came from Martin Harrow, the land agent Delacroix had hired out of Helena to consolidate the valley claims before summer. Harrow had been through twice in the winter months, making offers on the smaller spreads, and Samuel had turned him away both times. The man returned on a Tuesday in early May with a written offer and 2 hired hands riding behind him, which was not the kind of company a man brought when he expected a cordial conversation. Samuel was in the barn when they rode in. He heard the horses and came out with the pitchfork still in his hand, and he saw Harrow sitting his horse in the yard and Cora on the porch with Lily held behind her skirts, the child's small fingers clutching the fabric. He set the pitchfork against the barn wall. He walked across the yard slowly. He did not raise his voice. "Mr. Harrow," he said. "Holt." Harrow held out the folded document from his saddle. "Final offer. Delacroix is done negotiating." "Then we're both done," Samuel said. He did not take the paper. Harrow's eyes moved to Cora on the porch, and then back. Something in his face shifted toward meanness. "You've got a woman out here now. Running a place like this on what you bring in seems hard on her." Samuel looked at him steadily. "What goes on my property is not your concern. Your note at the Missoula Bank is my concern. Delacroix holds the paper on that note as of last month." Harrow let that sit for a moment. "Be a pity for the little girl to lose her home." Samuel was quiet for long enough that one of the hired hands shifted in his saddle. When he spoke, his voice had not changed in volume or pace, but something in it had become very exact. "You tell Delacroix that the Holt Ranch was here before he came to this valley, and it will be here after. Now get off my land." Harrow looked at him a moment longer, then turned his horse and rode out with his men behind him. The dust settled. The yard was quiet again. From the porch, Cora's voice came, even and low. "How bad is the note?" He turned to face her. She had her hand on Lily's shoulder now. Her eyes were direct, not alarmed, simply asking. "Bad enough that I needed a good spring," he said. She nodded once. "Then we'll have a good spring," she said, and she turned and took Lily inside. He stood in the yard for another minute, looking at where Harrow's horses had churned the mud. He was not, he realized, afraid in the way he had expected to be. He was something else, something harder to name. Steadied, perhaps, by the matter-of-fact way she had received the information and turned it into a plan. He had not had that since Margaret, the simple act of someone else receiving the weight of a thing. He went back to the barn. He worked until supper. He did not let himself think too carefully about the fact that the end of May was coming, and the terms of their arrangement were clear. The night before the calendar turned to June, Lily got into the Bible. She did it in the afternoon while Cora was at the stove and Samuel was still in the near pasture, and by the time Cora noticed, the child was sitting cross-legged on the hearthrug with the Bible open in her lap and a small stub of pencil in her hand. Cora went still in the kitchen doorway. On the family record page, in the shaky, careful printing of a 4-year-old who had been practicing her letters in secret on the back of paper flour sacks, Lily had added 3 words below the last entry. Cora. Our Cora. Cora crossed the room and knelt beside her. She did not say anything for a moment. She looked at the words on the page, written in a 4-year-old's earnest hand, and she felt something move in her chest that she had been holding shut for 2 years, the door of it, and it opened not with pain, but with the slow give of something that has been frozen and is now, at last, beginning to warm. "Lily," she said quietly. The child looked up. Her expression was solemn and uncertain, the way children look when they are not sure if they have done a beautiful thing or a forbidden one. "The Bible's important," Cora said. "This page especially." Lily's chin dipped. "I know. I'm sorry." Cora looked at the words again. Our Cora. She reached out and touched the penciled letters with one finger. "Don't be sorry," she said. "Not for this." She heard the door behind her. Samuel had come in from the pasture and he stood in the doorway, reading the room the way men read rooms when something has shifted inside them, carefully, trying to understand. His eyes went from Cora's face to the Bible in Lily's lap. He crossed the room and crouched down on the other side of the child and looked at the page. He was quiet for a long time. Lily looked up at him with that same solemn, uncertain face. He put one hand on top of her head, very gently. Then he looked across at Cora, and his eyes held something she had not seen in them before. Not in 7 weeks of mornings and suppers and near silences. What she saw was not gratitude, and it was not politeness. It was the look of a man arriving somewhere he had been walking toward without knowing it. "The terms end tomorrow," he said. "I know," she said. "I'd like to discuss otherwise," he said, "if you're willing." She held his gaze. She thought of his letter, unless either party found reason to discuss otherwise. She thought of the coat mended, the garden replanted, the child's hand at her skirts in the doorway. She thought of 2 years of not knowing what came next, and she thought that perhaps she was beginning to know. "I'm willing," she said. Lily looked between them with the bright, unsurprised attention of a child who has been quietly engineering something for weeks and is pleased to see it resolved. They did not speak in grand declarations. That was not their way, either of them. What happened over the following weeks was quieter than declarations and more lasting. Cora's wages were revised. Her room remained hers, private, with its latch. She had not asked for it to change and he had not suggested it, and both of them seemed to understand that this was right. What changed was smaller and more substantial. A second chair appeared on the porch, placed beside the one Samuel used in the evenings. A shelf was built in the kitchen, at a height that suited her reach, without comment. He began, without fanfare, to show her the ranch books. Not because she had asked, but because the books concerned her now, and she had a right to them. She began to introduce herself in town, without ceremony, as Cora Holt, testing the shape of it, and he heard it second-hand from the storekeeper and did not correct it. They married on the 14th of June in the front room of Reverend Caulfield's house, with Lily standing between them holding both their hands, and the only other witness was the Reverend's wife, who wept with the sincere enthusiasm of a woman who had been praying for Samuel Holt to find his way back to himself for 3 years. Lily wore a ribbon Cora had braided into her hair, blue, the only bright thing in the room, and it was the most beautiful thing Samuel could remember seeing in a long time. He told Cora that afterward, standing on the Reverend's porch in the June light, and she looked at him in the quiet way she had, receiving things, not deflecting them, and said, "The ribbon was a good idea." He smiled. It was a real one, and she had seen enough of his careful, restrained expressions by now to know the difference. As for Martin Harrow and the Delacroix Land Company, the note at the Missoula Bank was paid in full by the end of July. It was not paid easily, but it was paid with 2 good months of calves sold at fair market, and the kitchen garden that produced beyond what Cora had hoped, and the first autumn frost found the Holt Ranch standing exactly as it had stood every autumn before, solid, provisioned, and belonging to no one but the family inside it. The family Bible stayed on the shelf above the fireplace. Lily's penciled edition remained on the page, because Samuel had looked at it for a long time on the night of their marriage, and decided that what was written there was written true, and he had no reason to erase what was true. Beneath Lily's words, in his own careful hand, he added one more line. Cora Ruth Holt, née Voss, joined this family on the 9th of April, 1887. Let it stand. It stood. There is something in this story that the frontier knew and we sometimes forget, that a family is not made in a moment of ceremony. It is made in the small acts, the mended coat, the replanted seedling, the bowl set before a child without hesitation. Cora did not come to the Bitterroot Valley looking for love. She came looking to be of use. And that is sometimes how love finds us, not when we go searching for it, but when we simply show up and do the work that needs doing, and discover, somewhere in the doing of it, that we are no longer alone. Samuel did not plan to open his heart again, but a 4-year-old girl with a pencil wrote a name in a Bible, and the truth of it was too plain to argue with. Perhaps that is the lesson the mountains have been teaching all along, that belonging is not declared, it is built, one winter survived at a time. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment below and tell us, do you believe that love can find us when we stop looking for it and simply do the work in front of us? We would be so glad to hear your thoughts. And if you are new here, please do subscribe and join us for more journeys through the American frontier, where hard lives sometimes lead to the most beautiful endings of all. Good night. God bless you and yours. The summer settled over the Bitterroot Valley like a hand laid gently on a shoulder, warm, steady, without demand. Cora learned the rhythms of the ranch the way she had always learned things, by watching first and acting second, by asking questions that were practical rather than sentimental, by letting the place teach her rather than imposing herself upon it. She learned which gate latch stuck in wet weather and needed a shoulder behind it. She learned that the south-facing slope dried earliest in spring and was the right place to put the beans. She learned that Samuel woke before 4 every morning and stood at the kitchen window for exactly as long as it took to convince himself the day was worth beginning, and she began, without announcing it, to have the coffee ready when he arrived at the stove. He noticed. He did not say so for 2 weeks. Then one morning he arrived in the kitchen to find the pot already full and the fire already fed, and he stood for a moment and then said, quietly, "You don't have to get up this early." "I know," she said, and handed him his cup. He took it and looked at her in the gray pre-dawn light, and she saw him trying to find the words for something he was not yet practiced at saying. She saved him the effort. "I sleep better when the house is moving," she said. "That's all." He nodded slowly. It was not entirely the truth, and they both knew it, but it was the portion of truth that needed saying just then. and it was enough. Lily began to talk that summer. Not all at once. It was not the kind of change that announces itself. It was gradual, the way a river rises in snowmelt season, almost imperceptible from one day to the next, but unmistakable across a month. She began asking questions at supper. She began narrating what she saw from the porch, the hawk on the fence post, the color of the clouds, the particular slow way the old barn cat crossed the yard. She had opinions about which wildflowers should come inside and which should stay out, and she expressed them with the calm certainty of a child who has recently discovered that her voice produces results. Cora listened to all of it, every word. She listened with a completeness that Lily seemed to understand, because the child would sometimes stop in the middle of a sentence and look at Cora to make sure she was still attending, and Cora would meet her eyes and nod, and Lily would continue, satisfied. Samuel watched this from a distance the way he watched most things that mattered, quietly, from the side, without interrupting. He had a way of being present without requiring acknowledgement, and it was one of the things Cora had come to find steadying about him. He did not need to be at the center of every moment. He could simply be in the room, and that was sufficient. On a warm evening in late August, the three of them sat on the porch after supper. Samuel in his chair, Cora in the second chair that had appeared without explanation 6 weeks prior, Lily on the top step with her chin in her hands, watching the fireflies beginning to rise from the grass. The mountains were purple in the last light. The air smelled of dry grass and wood smoke from a neighbor's fire carried on the easy wind. Lily turned around and looked at both of them with the direct, unguarded attention that small children bring to important observations. "Are we a family?" she asked. The question landed in the quiet evening air, and neither adult answered immediately. Samuel looked at Cora. Cora looked at Lily. "Yes," Cora said, "we are." Lily seemed to receive this information with the same satisfaction she gave most answers that confirmed what she had already privately concluded. She turned back to the fireflies. After a moment she said, "I thought so," and that was the end of it. Samuel reached across the space between the two chairs, and his hand found Cora's on the armrest, and he covered it with his own, not urgently, not dramatically, just steadily, the way he did everything, and she turned her hand over and held his back. The fireflies rose in the darkening field, the mountains held their last color, and the Holt family sat on their porch in the Bitterroot Valley in the summer of 1887, in the particular quiet of people who have found, without quite looking for it, the place where they belong.